I may have been 8 or 9 years old. I lived in a nice little middle-class neighborhood. One of my best friends, Raven, lived across the street diagonally, one house down. So I often spent evenings at her home after school. Raven's mom would always call my mom to let her know I was leaving and to expect me in the next minute or so. This way, Mom knew to unlock the front door. Often she stood and watched from our screen door to make sure I got across okay. I had begun noticing this beat-up red car, possibly an old VW or Buick, that would pass almost every night as I ran back across the street. I would always head home just after dark, so possibly around 8:30, anytime I was leaving Raven's house. It was always rolling super slow. Speed limit was 25 miles per hour, and I want to say that this vehicle always passed at maybe half of that. One night as I was leaving, perhaps a bit later than usual, I stepped out of the front door of Raven's house, just as the car was about to pass the house completely. It stopped in the road and backed up. As I approached the side of the road, the window rolled down, just as the car stopped in front of me. A little woman with short reddish-brown hair and blue-framed glasses was smiling sweetly at me. "Hi, sweetheart. It's a little late for you to be out right now, isn't it?" she asked me. Her voice was low and pleasant. "No, Mom lets me. I'm just walking home," I replied stupidly. "Oh gosh, how silly of your mom. There's all kinds of bad people out late at night. Where do you live, sugar? I'll give you a ride." Just then, my mom came bursting out of our front door and screamed, "Leave her alone," as she began running to me. The woman's pleasant demeanor dropped and I heard her mutter a word, possibly fuck, as she slammed her foot on the gas and took off at well over the speed limit. She didn't stop at the nearby stop sign, just blasted through it to make her escape. I got a nice lecture that night and also a lot of tight hugs. My mom was super glad that she chose to look out the storm door to check on me instead of just letting me wander home. I could have been taken, and she told me as much. I cannot remember if police were called, but I never interacted with any officers. This doesn't end here though. Like most little kids, I really like setting up lemonade stands. Unlike most little kids, I also enjoyed making and baking cakes, and brownies and cookies, and also selling those at my lemonade stand. About 2 weeks after the prior incident, a beautiful sunny Saturday, Mom helped me with baking and helped me make lemonade to set up in the front yard with a sign. She had been paranoid ever since the prior incident and had hardly let me outside of her sight, aside from school and the bus. And this was no different. She stayed outside with me, all while I sold my little treats to pass her by, until she had to run to the restroom. It would obviously be a pain to take everything down and bring it inside, while she went and then bring it all back out and set it up again. She figured I'd be okay for a few minutes, considering it was the middle of the afternoon, and usually predators aren't that stupid. Mom left me alone for several minutes while she went to the bathroom, and presumably went to grab a snack as she was gone for 10 or so minutes. A familiar face walked up about 8 minutes in. She appeared from around some bushes down the street. I didn't see her in the distance walking up. I honestly saw her stand up from behind some bushes and brush herself off and begin walking towards me. Her clothes were smart and sophisticated looking, almost like a pantsuit. It was a real clash with how ratty her car had been. But that same placating smile was on her face, and her eyes glinted behind the same glasses. Ah, cute, a lemonade stand. Hi again, sweetie. Sorry to bother you the other night. I didn't realize how close to home you were. Mama told me not to talk to you. Go away, I said it as meanly as I could muster. But Mom had rightfully made me so frightened of this woman that I'm sure I just sounded like a scared little girl. I was. Come on now, Marie. She spoke my real name, first and last. My eyes got big. I'm a friend of your parents. I live down the street. Remember? We met at the pool this past summer. I had no recollection of her. If you're their friend, why did you leave so quick? Mom! I began shouting for my mother. This made her crouch down in front of my table, eye to eye with me. We don't need to do that. I just want to talk to you. You like to bake, right? I have a really fancy kitchen with a nice baker's oven. All sorts of cool gadgets to make baking cupcakes and stuff like that super fun. No. No, 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 no. Mom! I stood up and pushed the table into this woman and started running for the front door. This woman kicked the folding table away and started to chase me until my mom appeared in the doorway. She flung the door open and barreled into her, and the woman stopped running and stood in the yard. "What are you doing to my daughter?" my mom shouted at her. "My God, your child is rude. I was just trying to buy a cupcake and she shoved the table into me and ran. Now I have lemonade all over my clothes." The woman lied through her teeth. I don't think she was expecting my mom to come back. "That's the lady from the night, in the car." I was now trying to get around my mom and to hide behind her. My mom pulled out her cell phone, and this time I knew she called the police. This woman immediately ran off back the direction she came. The cops appeared. One took statements while the other one patrolled the neighborhood searching for her. They ended up finding her car parked at the grocery store that was up the road about half a mile at the other end of the neighborhood. They waited for her to show up and claim it. She never did. They couldn't find her. So, random lady in the red beater, please, let's not meet again. I met this kid who was 3 to 4 years older than me, on the bus. Let's call him Alex. And our friendship started out pretty innocent. We'd mostly talk about games. One day, he started talking about his cousin that used to own a pawn shop. And now it's closing, so if we want, he can give me some of the games they have doubles of. This was in the time of the N64, so they were cartridges. Time passed and he became increasingly strange, asking me what type of things I would give up for these games, and jokingly that he would sell me on drugs. I was young and naive, so this kind of made me uncomfortable. Still, I was forced to see him every day after school, as he lives 2 houses down from me. One day while he was at my house, and he took one of my eyelashes and told me if I blew it away, I could make any wish I want, and it would come true. He showed me with his eyelash, then asked me to do it too. I did. The next day he was visibly shaken up and sweaty, and he starts telling me we mess with forces we shouldn't have, and that I've been cursed, and that now I have a lump of poison in my throat that will release if I tell anyone about it. He called it black magic and told me his grandfather had taught him. This was all making me extremely anxious. I already had problems with early OCD and obsessive thoughts. He then explained that my parents would die unless I gave him one of my specific items, an N64 cartridge. I did it without thinking about it. He also borrowed my bike once to go to the store, and he got very strong mint spray and told me I had to drink it and then kiss my mom, and get me some into her mouth or she will die. I also did this. He kept asking for more things, and increasingly the consequences. He once scraped a sharp knife across my wrist in my kitchen, then explained if it had caught on a piece of skin and bled, it would have meant something was wrong. I cried a lot while he would explain these things, and the amount of emotion he displayed made it seem like more than simple bullying to get some games. I have always wondered if he was truly insane and manipulative, or if there was anything supernatural at work. It continues to affect me 20 years later, as I'm innately superstitious and diagnosed OCD. Eventually, I started avoiding him on the bus, and even went as far as hiding in a dresser without drawers within the view of my window by the door, so I could see if he came up to the door. Then for years after this, anytime I would leave the house, I would fear him seeing me. It honestly turned me into more of an introvert than I had ever been, and I pulled away from a lot of family like my brother, who couldn't understand why I didn't want to walk to the store with him anymore. Eventually he moved away, and the one comfort I had was one of my friends from school, and his brother had an experience with Alex where he broke a window of theirs and they confirmed he was insane. It comforted me to believe none of it was real, but I still hope I never meet this guy again. I don't know if I would punch him or have a panic attack. This is my mom's story, not mine. So my mom lived in Colorado Springs for 10 plus years, and it's where my two siblings and I were born. It was 1994, just 4 days after my mom's 20th birthday. She was working at an Arby's just a few blocks from her home. So she worked well into the 12 to 1 a.m. Her manager was Missy Berry, who was murdered for being a bitch basically. My mom only worked there for not even a month, so she didn't have an opinion on her yet. But Missy was nice to my mom. There was one employee named Cliff who hated Missy's guts. My mom told me she remembered that he'd call her a bitch all the time, and he loved to say that he'd end up killing her. The night of the murder, Missy was going to take the money they made and go to the bank as always. But it was a cold night and my mom had to walk home. Missy offered my mom a ride home. This was before Cliff had asked for a ride home so he could actually kill and rob her. So obviously my mom's ride was pretty short. My mom noticed how weird it was that Cliff would ask for or accept a ride from someone he claimed to hate so much, but she shrugged it off as it was cold. Not 5 minutes later, Cliff took out a gun and shot Missy, and took the money she had on her when they were stopped at a light. My mom didn't hear about it until days later, when she read the paper. Of course, this shook her to the core. She didn't need to go to the police because they already found out who had done it. Otherwise, she would have. The weirdest part about this whole thing was the fact that my grandpa on my dad's side was a detective who had to deal with this case. Cliff flew to England with the money he stole, and my grandpa had to go over there and go to the British court to plead that they wouldn't execute him, or something along that line. My mom later met my dad that year, or early the next year. If you watch Homicide Hunter Season 2, Episode 6, you can see my grandpa working on the case. My mom was never once mentioned in the episode, or the case because she was in the back seat of the car, and they had already concluded that the killer was in the passenger side of the crime scene. She, Cliff, and Missy were the only ones who knew she had ever ridden with them. And in the Homicide Hunter episode, a cop says he saw Cliff acting suspicious at Arby's, and Missy comes out to go home. She offers him a ride, but my mom was inside, so the officer never saw my mom. There are a few holes in the story, but my mom is 46 and this was 26 years ago, so obviously her memory isn't spot on. Plus, she has absolutely no reason to lie about such a thing. Another thing I'd like to point out is I only found the episode of Homicide Hunter because I looked up my grandpa's name, and the show because he had been on it multiple times, and I wanted to watch it. It's so weird because I was looking it up when my mom told me this story, and the first episode to pop up was the same case. If Cliff hadn't decided to wait until my mom got in the car, I most likely wouldn't be writing this right now. So Cliff, I hope you never get out of jail. Obligatory clarification. This happened about 5 years ago, but I still wonder what could have happened if I didn't notice the man before getting in my car. When I was in college, I would park near campus in a public lot and take the light rail to my classes. I went to a large university, so parking on campus is nearly impossible. My home at the time was only a couple miles from the public lot, so it was a quick drive from the light rail station. One afternoon when I was heading home from campus, it had been raining pretty heavily, and I was in a hurry to get to the car from the light rail station due to the weather. I remember wearing my Doc Martens combat boots, which put me at about 6'3". As a 19-year-old female, seems unimportant, but I think they saved my life. Basically, I towered over everybody, and usually this draws attention, both good and bad. As I'm approaching my car, I glance up and see a short man hurrying over to me in the parking lot. He stops at the back passenger door of my car. As I'm looking for my keys standing by my driver's door, I immediately am on high alert, freaked out by the stranger running over to me. He looks to be in his mid-30s, about 5'5", and very disheveled. I ask, "Can I help you with something?" He says, "Yeah, I just got out of prison. I need to call my son," in distant mumbling. "I just need a ride to this place." I, of course, said, "No, I'm sorry. I need to get going." The next part is what really freaked me out. He then steps towards me and, in a threatening demeanor, comes over him and he says, "Get in the car." My heart starts beating so fast. I've been in some weird situations, but nothing where I felt so directly threatened. I stood my ground, not moving to open the door, and simply said no, again. And he says more aggressively, "Get in the car." I remember gritting my teeth and barely being able to just say no for a second time. At this point, I can tell he's sizing me up. We stood there in silence holding eye contact, and I felt myself sizing him up as well. Although I'm very thin for my height, I was looming over him by my boots. There's no way he'd force me into my car without somebody noticing. I kept standing there waiting for him to leave, because I knew if I went to open the door, I'd be in more danger. Finally, after about a minute of this stare down, he starts backing away, mumbling some indistinct cuss words. I got in my car, fucking shaking, as I drove home. Short, creepy potential hijacker. Let's not meet ever again. When I was 14, I went to meet a man I'd talked with on the internet at his hotel room on the beach. Stupid, I know, but this is important for later. I snuck out at 1 a.m. and started the 4-mile walk. He told me he was my age, was having a party, and that his friends would love to meet me. I believed him. At the beginning of my journey, I decided I was going to walk along the median rather than the sidewalk, because either side of the road was lined with woods. This is what ultimately saved my life. My biggest fear at the time was someone coming out to get me. I walked about 1.5 miles, more than a dozen people asking if I needed a ride, before I encountered the man who would change my life forever. He was greasy and stale. He had wireframe glasses, a receding hairline, and crooked teeth. I was stopped when he pulled up to the median asking if I needed a ride. I told him no thank you, as I did with everyone else, and continued walking. He followed me in his car and asked again. I told him no and proceeded to act like I was calling someone, as my phone had just died. He didn't like that. This time he didn't ask, but yelled and demanded I get into the car. I felt like a deer in headlights. No phone, no transportation, no one around to hear me scream. I was terrified. He got out of the car and chased me a few feet before he yanked my hoodie, forcing me to the ground. At this point, I'm crying, trying to gasp for air because his hand is so tight over my mouth and nose. He tossed me in the back seat like a piece of trash and got in the car. I frantically tried to open the doors and the windows, but he had child locks on everything. He started to laugh and my heart dropped. I'll never forget what happened next. It just so happened an officer thought she had heard suspicious sounds coming from the street when he yelled and turned her lights off to investigate. She was looking for me because people were calling it a little girl walking on the median at 2 a.m. She watched him toss me into the car, and as she was taking down his plate and threw her lights on, he was going to flee, but the car stalled, and she whipped her car in front of his. He was immediately detained, and the officer called another squad car to pick me up. Come to find out, the man who tried to kidnap me was a convicted sex offender. I had to explain to the female officer why I was out so late, what I was doing, and where my parents were. She plugged my phone in when I explained the party, and sent another officer to the hotel to check things out. My dream guy wasn't 14, he was 32, and his friends were escorts. Both men had charges pressed on them, and I had to appear in court. Attempted kidnapper was sentenced to 15 years, and was extradited back to his home state. My dream guy was sentenced to 4 years. That had to be the most terrifying, yet luckiest day of my life. To this day, 9 years later, I refuse to meet people online or go anywhere I don't have to at night. So, pedophiliac, kidnapper, and dream guy, let's not meet again. This occurred in 2017, and is 100% true, due to a multitude of factors, including a recent death of a close friend. I was unbearably depressed at this time of my life. For that reason, my family flew across the country to visit me in LA, where I live. We thought it'd be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was the off-season. It was late November. The weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty, besides locals and a few straggling tourists such as ourselves. Our first priority was to ditch our luggage so we can explore the island, so we immediately checked into our motel. Though that word hardly does the place justice. I call it a motel because all the doors to the rooms exited to the outside, but in actuality our room was one of 20 to 30 quaint guest house looking buildings arranged in a sort of horseshoe shape around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked dead straight, you'd reach the room we were given, essentially on the corner before you have to go to the right to go further into the horseshoe. So from our room, one path led back to the street, the other further into the secluded maze of rooms. Stay with me. After a day of exploring and having just finished dinner, it was time for the cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and let me just say, it gets dark. Similarly dark was my headspace after the dinner conversation took a left-hand turn, and my overwhelming depression got the best of me. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears, and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them I just needed to go to sleep, and I did immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I was already losing consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up to my mom saying my name, a harsh whisper. The room had 2 beds, my parents' bed, closer to the door, and mine further in the room. My mom's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I didn't blame her considering my mental state at the time. Groggy, I rolled over. "What?" I asked, as my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming in through the curtains. I saw her turn and face me. She was surprised to see me in my bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who was she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking, to see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. I know this is Let's Not Meet, and you're reading this knowing a creepy thing is going to happen. It's in the title. But understand how horrifically startled it is to be on an island in the middle of the ocean, and wake up to see a hooded stranger looming over you. This moment seemed to last forever. Life isn't like movies, where characters unleash a blood-curdling scream. Sometimes the only thing that comes out is something panicked and guttural. My mom's words became low and severe, as she said my dad's name in a dire voice I've never heard her use before. Then the hooded figure did something so bizarre and unsettling. It didn't advance towards us, but instead crouched in the corner near where it stood. The way it crouched was so absolutely unexpected, even in regards to this already unexpected situation, that it terrified me. It seemed animalistic. I knew 2 things. The hooded figure had been standing over us sleeping, and it's not acting in any sort of way that I can understand, as opposed to the infinite moment of this figure standing over us mere seconds ago. The series of events that unfolded when my hulking ex-military dad woke happened in an instant. Suddenly, we're out the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mom was screaming, "Get him!"
Get him!" My dad was running one path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shouting through sheer adrenaline, "I'm going to fucking kill you." I ran down the other path, towards the street. When I got there, not a sign of the intruder, but it became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad quietly walking back, his head low. He gets really close to me and I hear him say, "It's a fucking kid." The explanation: some young teen, tall and lanky in his mid-20s, wearing all black including a black hoodie, went into the wrong room. Our room. The one time my parents just so happened to forget to lock the door. My mom woke up when he entered, and seeing a tall person in black hoodie, thought he was me, assumingly leaving the room in a depressive episode. And when the hooded figure crouched, it was him realizing he'd made a mistake and panicking. He was scared of us. As I got back to the room, my mom walked out and hugs this kid, who was now crying his eyes out. I would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me, with murder in his eyes. So to the now traumatized kid from Catalina Island, I look forward to reading your Let's Not Meet of this same event, from your perspective.
So this happened back in 2017, around when my brother ended his life. How we found out was really messed up. My aunt, on my mom's side, called and said that she may have some bad news for us. Me and my mom and my brother. She had stated that he may have killed himself, but she's not sure. I had my grandma's number and called her. I asked if my brother Lewis had really passed. She told me that he did and that he killed himself. I don't really remember what was said, but the conversation lasted barely 5 minutes, and when I hung up, me and my mom shared a look. We decided to immediately get in the car and go to my grandmother's house, an hour away, to get the full story. I've never seen my mom drive so fast and so efficient. When we were there, I was walking up to her house on weak knees, not really believing that it was real. Knocking on the door, I went numb. There was no way she would lie and would have no reason to. She let us in and explained what happened. Details are too personal. I got pictures of the suicide note and gathered a lot of his stuff, mainly for memories. The next couple of days were a struggle, but I did the right thing by my family and reached out to arrange a memorial, considering he was already cremated, and we weren't allowed to have any of his remains. It was only fair for my family on my dad's side to know what happened, so therefore I reached and arranged basically everything. Time, place, and alcohol. He loved his alcohol. Me and my mom, her oldest friend, showed up at my aunt's house, on my dad's side. Not the one who contacted us with the I don't know crap. Mostly everyone is there that I invited, except for my dad. Super complicated there. We were welcomed with open arms. I hadn't seen them in 5 to 6 years, and my mom even longer, thanks to my dad lying his ass off. Another story for another time. The afternoon goes on for a bit when my mom says she just wants to leave. I really don't blame her though. So I gather everyone around and pull up the suicide note to read aloud. I barely get through it without fully sobbing. Of course, tears were rolling. I told my mom that she could pick me up the next day, considering we arrived together and I wanted to visit my family that I wasn't allowed to be around, thanks to my jerk-off dad. The day went on and I was hanging out with everyone, eating and drinking, handing out my brother's memorabilia to everyone who had a close connection to. After nightfall, the younger adults, like me, left to go hang out at another house and play pool. We kept drinking too. As the night went on, I went from one house to another, about 4 times, and at least 1 to 3 people broke off each time. We went to a different house until it was me and a single male cousin of mine. Now, this is the serious part, where I have to elaborate that me and this cousin aren't blood related, but I still knew him to be family. So what happened next is super freaking creepy. The last house I was at was another round of family that I hadn't seen for years, and we had just finished playing pool, and they were tired. I was drunk as shit, but still sober enough to know right and wrong, due to me still mourning my brother. I went ahead and left with this cousin, because I promised to myself to hang out with everyone, evenly due to the promise I made to myself, that even though my dad lied to me, I would still get to know everyone. We got to his apartment around 3 a.m., and just jammed out to some music for the first hour, but I felt creeped out because he seemed really entrapped with me, continuously watching me closely. More closely than what I was used to coming from a family member at least. I got a really worried feeling in the pit of my stomach, but definitely couldn't prepare myself what came next, with everything that transpired. The living room I was in wasn't tiny. It had enough room for a full-size couch, a love seat, a coffee table, a TV stand with a TV on it, stereo and surround speakers. I was still drinking Bud Light, my brother's favorite beer, and I'm not certain if my cousin thought I was either sad, drunk, or desperate enough, considering I hadn't been with anyone for over a year, to even fathom that this scenario was a possibility. But he asked me straight up, "You want to have sex?" I was struck stupid for a second and replied, "What? We're related. Not by blood, so it wouldn't even be a problem." He casually answered, as if already guessing what the fuck I was gonna say. "No way. I came here to hang out with you, to get reconnected with my family. Besides, blood or not, you're still family." I was really upset by this. "Alright, fine," he said, seemingly nonchalant. But shit felt offset, like I ruined all of his plans. The night kept going, him playing it cool while I still had this creepy vibe. After about 5 a.m., I finally called it quits and said I wanted to crash. Basically passed the hell out. I was trashed. He offered for me to sleep in his bed with him. I respectfully declined and said the couch was good enough for me. Curling up, I got comfy. He brought a blanket and a pillow and just lounged in the love seat until I was out. I woke up probably a few minutes later to a weird sensation. He was standing above me, grabbing his privates over his clothes and whispering, "You know where I'll be," and wandered into his room. After about an hour of pure horror, I fell back asleep. Nothing happened after that, and I thank Gaia. To my cousin who tried to take advantage of my sorrow, I will make damn sure we never meet again. Hey guys, I want to thank you for listening. If you haven't yet, please consider clicking that subscribe button and bell icon to get notified of all future videos. I try to post around 5 times a week. If you have a story of your own and you'd like featured on the channel, head over to my subreddit, r/JensenOfficial. And if you want early access to my videos, as well as your name featured on each video, head over to my Patreon, where only $1 a month gets you that and some other fun perks. I've also got some merch now over on Spreadshirt. I as well offer all my videos and my podcasts that can be found on all major podcast services. All links will be located in the description field. I hope everyone has a good night, and remember, keep it spooky. Alright, good night guys.